flags flying from the dome, the Capitol wore a holiday garb as it stood ready for the inauguration of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 32nd President of the United States. And in its shadow, on the Capitol Plaza, expectant thousands gathered for hours before the ceremony to see the greatest event in the life of the nation, the swearing in of a new president. Women wrapped themselves in blankets to keep warm during the weary hours of waiting, and little boys perched in trees to see it all. Meanwhile, President and Mrs. Roosevelt arrived at the White House, their new home, to call for the retiring president and Mrs. Hoover before beginning the trip to the Capitol. As the car stopped at the main entrance, Mr. Roosevelt's escorts got out first. Then, as the group stood around the presidential car, Mrs. Roosevelt stepped out, going up on the portico to greet Mr. and Mrs. Hoover while the president remained seated in the car. The Hoovers emerged smiling and greeted the new First Lady like an old friend, chatting for a few moments. Then Mr. Hoover entered the car for his last ride as president, taking his place next to Mr. Roosevelt and sharing his blanket. Then the historic trip began, the incoming and outgoing presidents riding side by side, followed by their wives, who seemed in the best of spirits. With Secret Service men on the running board, Mr. Roosevelt and Mr. Hoover led the cortege slowly down Pennsylvania Avenue, acknowledging the cheers of thousands who lined the sidewalks every step of the way. The crowd gave them a great ovation. Escorted by the 3rd United States Cavalry, the White House bodyguard, the cars proceeded down toward the Capitol in the distance, bearing with them the hopes of the country for a new deal.
I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God. This is preeminently the time to speak the truth, the whole truth, frankly and boldly. Nor need we shrink from honestly facing conditions in our country today. This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper. Restoration calls, however, not for changes in ethics alone. This nation is asking for action, and action now. Our greatest primary task is to put people to work. Finally, in our progress towards a resumption of work, we require 2 safeguards against a return of the evils of the old order. There must be a strict supervision of all banking and credits and investments. There must be an end to speculation with other people's money. And there must be provision for an adequate but sound currency. I am prepared, under my constitutional duty, to recommend the measures that a stricken nation in the midst of a stricken world may require. These measures, or such other measures as the Congress may build out of its experience and wisdom, I shall seek within my constitutional authority to bring to speedy adoption. But in the event that the Congress shall fail to take one of these 2 courses, in the event that the national emergency is still critical, I shall not evade the clear course of duty that will then confront me. I shall ask the Congress for the one remaining instrument to meet the crisis: broad executive power to wage a war against the emergency as great as the power that would be given to me if we were in fact invaded by a foreign foe.
Returning from the Capitol after the inaugural ceremony, behind their escort of motorcycle police and cavalry, President Roosevelt and the new First Lady of the land received a continuous ovation from the 500,000 spectators jammed on the sidewalks along the route. As they rode to the White House, their future home, President and Mrs. Roosevelt waved to their admirers. Here they are arriving at the White House. James, the President's eldest son, is in the front seat. And as they got out of their car to go into the reviewing stand, they stopped long enough to pose for a family picture, while Mr. Roosevelt complimented the Pathé News cameramen on their hard day's work.
You can say that the cameramen are all in very good physical condition. They run 5 miles. Would you say that, Mr. President?
Then came the big parade, led by General Douglas MacArthur as Grand Marshal, which marched up Pennsylvania Avenue 18,000 strong. Behind the standard bearers of the color guard carrying massed flags which waved proudly in the breeze came the regular Army units. A solid phalanx of infantrymen, swinging in rhythm, led the great host in a martial display that thrilled thousands who traveled many miles to view the marches. For 3 solid hours, President Roosevelt returned salutes, and overhead crack Air Corps flyers swept the skies in honor of the new Commander-in-Chief. The artillery teams had to step carefully to avoid slipping on the smooth pavement as the caissons and field pieces kept rolling along. But despite the splendid performance of the well-drilled teams, one accident occurred. Look, the rider was thrown under the horse, which rolls on him, but he gets clear and is up again, limping but not badly hurt. And what might have been a serious accident ends as a minor mishap. Here comes the Navy, represented by Blue Jackets, who marched in their own seagoing style and got plenty of applause. Governor Moore of New Jersey rides past waving to his friends. And here's Governor Ritchie of Maryland. New York's Tammany Braves, led by the Happy Warrior, Al Smith, and Big Chief Curry. The marchers were a sight that thrilled both young and old, from President Roosevelt in the glass-covered reviewing stand to this patriotic little American. A stirring spectacle that symbolized America's spirit, marching onward to a new deal and better days.